Hello, algebra students. We are continuing our study on using square roots to solve quadratic equations. Before we start any examples, I want to go over the steps to solving a quadratic equation. I have them over here on the left. This would be a wonderful thing to have in your notes. If we are solving quadratic equations using square roots, which is the topic for today, we're going to talk more about what that means as we dive into this topic. What we're going to do is we are going to first use algebra to solve for the thing that is being squared. So in all of the problems today, the thing that is being squared is going to be an x. In future topics, it's going to be more complicated than that. So solve for the thing that is being squared. In this case, solve for the x squared. Once you have x squared by itself, take the square root of both sides to get rid of that squared. Square root and squaring are inverses of each other, just like adding and subtracting are inverses, just like multiplying and dividing are inverses. Squaring and square root are inverses, they cancel each other out. If you do it to one side, you would have to do it to the other side. This is an important note right here. Taking the square root of both sides creates a plus or minus. What I mean by that is our answer here, the square root and the square cancel each other out. So on the left side, we're just going to have x. And on the right side, in front of our solution, we're going to have a plus or minus here. And then simplify the square root if possible. We all know what the square root of 4 is. That's one of our, should be memorized at this point. We know that the square root of 4 is 2, but because we took the square root of both sides, it's not just 2, it's plus or minus 2. Why is it plus or minus 2? Well, if you were to think about plugging something back into this equation, 2 squared is 4, 2 times 2. But also, negative 2 times negative 2. Negative 2 squared is also 4, right? Negative 2 times negative 2 is indeed 4. And so that's why we end up with a plus or minus in our final answer. And that would be the extent of the answer for this problem, x squared equals 4. Now, obviously, they're going to be more complicated than that at times. We have an example that says x squared is equal to 8. And once again, solve for the thing that is being squared. X is being squared. It's already solved for. It's already by itself. Then you would take the square root of both sides, just like so. The square root and the square cancel each other out, so we just have x on the left, and on the right side, taking the square root created the plus or minus, so we have plus or minus the square root of 8. Now we need to simplify the square root if possible, and the square root of 8 can be simplified. This is a recall to our previous section that we just covered. What you have to do is you have to look at this list of numbers, and this is an infinite list, but I listed it up quite a ways. Look at this list of numbers and say, do any of these numbers divide 8? You can disregard the 1, because 1 divides everything, but do any of the rest of the numbers evenly divide 8? And obviously it's got to be smaller than 8 if it's going to divide 8 evenly, and 4 actually does work. 8 divided by 4 does produce a whole number. 8 divided by 4, obviously I don't need to type this in, but if you divide it by the number up here and you get a whole number like you did, no fraction, that tells you that it needs to be simplified. So what we end up with is x is equal to, still have the plus or minus, but we said 4 is a perfect square factor of 8. So what you would do is you'd say root 4, because that's the number that divides it evenly, and 4 times what is 8? That would be 2. So these things multiply to 8, and one of these numbers is up in our list. And that's when we should be simplifying it. The reason it's up in the list, 4 is because you can take the square root of 4. Of course, the square root of 4 is 2. And root 2 does not have a perfect square factor. None of these numbers divides 2 other than 1, but we just disregard 1. So we would end up with our answer of x is equal to plus or minus 2 root 2. What we're saying is that 2 root 2 squared is 8, and that is indeed true. We could try it out here. If we did, let's open up a set of parentheses, 2 root 2, and then we squared this. Is it going to accept that? Yeah. No. 2, I'm going to try to type it in better. 2, oh boy, I'm really screwing this up. 2 square root of 2, but then I want the parentheses after it. There you go. So 2 root 2 squared is 8. Let's try another one. They are going to get more complicated, of course. Use algebra to solve for the thing that is being squared. The thing that is being squared is just the x here. 3 is not being squared. 3 is being multiplied by x squared. So we need to first undo that 3. We're going to undo that 3 by dividing both sides by 3. And we would have x squared is equal to 32. So that is step 1. We solved for the thing that is being squared. Now we take the square root of both sides, square root of both sides, and we end up with x is equal to plus or minus, right? Whenever you take the square root of both sides, it creates a plus or minus, the square root of 32. Now we need to consider if this has any perfect square factors. Do any of these numbers divide 32 evenly? And you guys are going to get better at this task. It might be kind of putsy now. I think a good way to start is 32 would be like right here between these two. So what you can do is you can just take your number, 32, and divide it by the next number underneath it, 25, and it comes out as decimal, so that one didn't work. And then do 32, and then just work your way down. This is if you're bad at thinking of the factors. This is a possibility for you. 32 divided by 16. Hey, that does work, right? So we did this number, and then we're just going to work our way down. 32 divided by 16 is 2, so you could rewrite this as x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 16 square root of 2. Right, I chose 16 and 2 because looking over here at the calculator, 16 and 2 are the numbers that worked to divide our number 32. The number that's up in the list is 16, so that one needs to be simplified, and the square root of 16 is 4. Answer, x is equal to plus or minus 4 root 2. It's a good time to pause this, try this one on the right out on your own, see how you do. It's the exact same level of difficulty as the first one. Process is going to be the exact same. Our first step is to divide by 2, and we get x squared is equal to 12. Now the thing that is being squared, which is x, is by itself, so we would take the square root of both sides. We get x, square root, square cancel each other out. X is equal to plus or minus the square root of 12. We need to look up at our numbers and see if any of these numbers divides 12 evenly, and 4 does, because 4 times 3 is 12. Which leads us to our answer of x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 4 is 2, 2 root 3. Answer. Boom. We got more examples. Use algebra to solve for the thing that is being squared. The thing that is being squared is x squared. We need to solve for x squared. If this was the problem 2x plus 1 equals 41, you guys would all know what to do first. You would know just to subtract 1 and then divide by 2. It's going to be the same idea here. You're going to subtract 1 first. So you have 2x squared is equal to 40. And then divide by 2, and you would get x squared is equal to 20. And that's the thing that, now x squared is by itself. To undo x squared, to undo the squared, you have to take the square root of both sides. So you have x is equal to, taking the square root of both sides creates a plus or minus the square root of 20. Look up at our numbers up here, this list, and see if any of these numbers evenly divide 20, and 4 does. X is equal to the square root of 4, the square root of 5. Square root of 4 can be simplified to 2 root 5. Answer. Trying this one out, maybe a good chance for you guys to pause this. Add 3 to both sides. You would have x squared is equal to 27. Take the square root of both sides now, and that would be x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 27. Now, do any of these numbers evenly divide 27? Once again, if you didn't see it, you could just go to your calculator and do 27 divided by 25. Didn't turn out as a nice number. 27 divided by 16 won't turn out as an easy number. 27 divided by 9, ding, ding, ding. That evenly divides 27. So you'd end up with x is equal to plus or minus root 9, because that's the number that's up here, times root 3. And the one that's up there can be simplified. The square root of 9, of course, is 3. X is equal to plus or minus 3 root 3. There's one question in your homework that looks like this, and I wanted to cover it. I want to know if I skipped a slide. There's one more thing I want to show you. Two more things I have to show you. One of them has a question that looks like this, and it's unique, I guess, because when you look to solve for x squared, you'd first divide by 4. If you divide by 4 on both sides, you'd end up with x squared is equal to, now you could have written it as a decimal, but I don't want you to, because this unique example is going to work a lot better if you write it as a fraction. So you'd end up with x squared is equal to 81 over 4. Like I said, if you type this in your calculator, it probably gave you a decimal, but don't convert it into that decimal. Instead, okay, we did step 1. Now take the square root of both sides. Taking the square root of both sides is going to leave us with x is equal to, of course, that plus or minus the square root of 81 over 4. Now, both 81 and 4 are numbers that are up here, 81 and 4. And so, actually, how this simplifies, the square root of 81 is 9, and the square root of 4 is 2, and that's just it. We took the square root of both of our numbers, and that's what caused the root to go away, and we end up with plus or minus 9 over 2. And so it's question number 14 on your worksheet. It looks very similar to this, so just know that that's how that would simplify. Same idea here. We can divide both sides by 16, so we get x squared is equal to 121 over 16. Both of these numbers are up here. So we can take the square root of both sides and get x is equal to plus or minus. The square root of 121 is 11, and the square root of 16 is 4 plus or minus 11 fourths. Now I mentioned I wanted to show you one more thing. We already did these examples, but let's do negative 3x squared is equal to 75. Because I know this shows up a couple times. So we need to solve for the thing that is being squared. The thing that is being squared is x squared, so we divide both sides by negative 3. And those cancel, and we end up with x is equal to x is equal to negative 25. X squared is equal to negative 25. Okay. When you go to take the square root of both sides, square root here, square root here, you end up with x is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 25. And I hope this is something you remember from a previous algebra course or math class, I guess. You're not allowed to take the square root of a negative number. So if you ever are taking the square root of a negative number, this is going to be, I would say no solution, but that's not technically true. You are going to learn about a new set of numbers in Algebra 2 that does make this true. So the actual language I'm going to be looking for is no real solution. If you wrote no solution, I wouldn't mark it wrong, but know that you can take the square root of a negative number, you know, in Algebra 2, but you can't in Algebra 1. So anytime you're taking the square root of a negative, you can stop there and be like, oh, I'm not allowed to do that. No real solution. That's what I have for you guys today. Please let me know if you have any questions, and good luck.